Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Juliet Hart. She is the CEO and founder of Hart Chin. She is a leadership and career coach who works with scientists so they can become influential leaders. Working for years as a scientist, she ultimately transitioned into talent development, which is quite the switch. So I'm really interested to learn more about why she made that transition, how she works with her clients, and how being an effective communicator has worked in her favor. Welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Juliet.
Thanks, Neil. I'm super excited to have this conversation with you.
Great. So, from
Yeah.
first question is, where did your interest in STEM even come from?
Oh gosh, you're going way back. I think in general, I've just always liked to tinker and kind of play around with stuff and explore and understand, discover. Um, but I think yeah, maybe in my mindset somewhere that, I should be a doctor. I think it's the baseline. I think be a doctor, if not a lawyer, be a doctor. So try out for that role and see where it goes, right? So over time, I think, I really love the sciences. I really enjoyed it. And it just kept going and going until I hit research in college. And then I really loved it. Like I loved being in the lab, enjoying that aspect of tinkering with different variables, right? What can I control? What can I test? What results are we going to come out with at the end? And that was just a lot of fun. And I joke sometimes too that kind of my background, none of my family have a lot of like science, maybe not, maybe some science, but maybe not some medicine, history, or something like that. And they're like, I need to know enough about my own health and advocating for myself and what is medicine about and all of that, so that I know what I'm talking about when I'm thinking about my own health. So that kind of also, made me interested and curious and what's the doctor route and all of that. But at the end of the day, I volunteered at a lot of hospitals, a lot of different areas in the hospital, and found out that I kind of just didn't want to work in a setting where there were a lot of patients. It made me sad, and I found that I'm that type of person that I was more interested in the uncovering and listening to what can we what answers can we explore and uncover. So that was kind of an interesting way to my starting science career.
I had initially wanted to be a doctor too, but then I used to watch this show on TV called ER. And
Yeah.
I noticed that a lot of these doctors, at least the ones that worked in the emergency room, they'd have to sleep at the hospital and then have to wake up at all these god awful times. And I just thought, this ain't for me. No, I need my sleep.
That's so funny. Yeah, no, I hear you. I actually love the idea of like the big, high kind of energy kind of job. And I wanted to be a paramedic at some point, but growing up in Brooklyn, I didn't know how to drive, so that didn't really help. Um, so that part, like the gore, that stuff is actually pretty interesting to me. But the not the gore part, but like the blood, and I was willing to um, be involved in that, but I couldn't. It was the part of the emotional part of feeling the pain of the person that I think I was a little too connected to. So at
Oh,
the end of the day, yeah,
yeah, see,
interesting question.
yeah, you didn't want to feel the pain, and I wanted to sleep, so we all had our reasonings for going in another direction. So, what kind of work did you do once you graduated from school?
Yeah, so I started in the bench in the lab. I did some work in different areas, pockets of it, mostly with animal behavioral research. Started off with like understanding cocaine and the behavioral effects on rats. And then I did some work on understanding neurobiology of learning and memory and use rat models. So it was really, really neat stuff. And then I found myself not going all the way in my graduate career. So I started a PhD program, but I didn't complete it. That was a tough time for me, but I realized when I was there, I was in San Diego or in Southern California, and I knew biotech was in that area. So I kind of switched and said, what skills do I have, and can I transition them into a job, right? So biotech industry was booming at that point. A lot of people wanted in vivo pharmacologists. People were doing work with animals. That wasn't necessarily like an area that we were trained in back in the day. So it was something that we kind of fell into. We had animal work and research, so we could do it in an industry setting. So I found myself in a small 10-person company startup, and then as startups go, they lay off about a year later, and then start another, go in another small company before I started working at a larger one, notably Johnson and Johnson. So it was a kind of a path where at each stage I was working in a laboratory setting, but in a different kind of organizational context, like a small company, which is high risk, high reward kind of feeling, and everyone pitches in, no matter what you know how to do or you don't know how to do. And then, all the way to the larger organization where you have a very specialized expertise that you're capable of and contributing to the team. So that was a fun part of my career. Yeah.
Yeah, I also noticed, well, I mentioned in the intro that you made a transition into talent development. So what was the motivation to do that?
So that's a big transition. And it was a point in time where I was doing my work and I was honored with the opportunity to speak about my research. This was at Johnson and Johnson, and it was the opportunity was to give a talk in front of 1,000 people. And for me, the ramp up to presenting and preparing for it was quite a bit of a challenge, right? I was like nervous and worried and all of that. But I don't think to your point and what you do also is that we didn't have that training that someone says, well, this is how you present, right? You see other people, but it's no one formally training you. So when I gave my talk, I think it was pretty standard run of the mill in terms of like I gave my data and gave my conclusion, but at the end, I think I really regretted that I didn't say have a call to action, right? Something that you definitely talk about these days, and just something to engage people and understand what is it my audience wants to know about my work, and how can we build a relationship and engage with each other, so increasing the influence and impact of my work. But I didn't know any of that back then, right? I'm just like, oh, come on, no one, talked to me after that. There was 1,000 people in the audience, and could I've done better? And I thought, yeah, I could have. So when I was coming back to the workplace, I thought to myself, what can I do better? What resources exist, or things that I can do that I can figure out a better path and have more influence. And that transitioned into this opportunity, especially where I was at. A group of people had interest in, how else can we, enhance our career development, right? Learn about presenting skills, learn about any kind of career development skills, learn about our own industry and our profession. And that kind of um, blew up into something that just people got interested in, and that notably people would say to me, it's like, Juliet, you understand us, you understand what we need. And it had clicked to me that no one else was kind of doing this type of work. And so in the process, I had also connected with internal and external resources, notably the J&J's HR department, and said, wow, they have all these resources that we don't take advantage of. Why wouldn't we? So connecting with them, building a relationship, I think kind of propelled me into that future of, well, what can I do if I knew more about how do we develop people? So long story, a little bit shorter, I jumped over to the HR side. They were willing to take a risk on me to let me just do some basic work. But at the same time, for me, it was just an awareness of what a different culture looked like, from science to HR, from corporate culture to, the lab culture, right? It was eye-opening as to how a same organization could feel so different in terms of the types of people, their expectations, how they do things, how they work, and then also how they train their people. So I learned a lot in that opportunity and realized that I had something that I could take back to the group of people that I admire so much as scientists, in trying to discover, innovate, be creative, and really do special work for the world. So,
What prompted you to start Hart and Chin?
oh yeah. So, working with global talent development was really exciting. And I think the question to me though was, on that level, was scale was so tremendous, working with, thinking about all 200,000 employees for J&J's. How do you tap into that? For me, I wanted to work in a very specific group, particularly like the STEM or technical expert, because I knew that coming from that area, is we don't get the training of how do we communicate better, how do we manage each other, lead each other better, work with each other better. So that wasn't common, certainly back in my day. So it was just like, what could I do? And I said, let me give it a shot and go on my own. So, but I feel like, we have a lot in common in terms of this storyline here.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. So with the clients that you work with Hart and Chin, what do they typically come what issues do they typically come to you with, and how do you help them?
Yeah, so as you identified, like communication is always a challenge. And not only just the presentation part of it, but for me, I like to really focus on how do you communicate with others to work more effectively, right? So not just the data presentation, which is very important, which is just like the foundational start, right? You need to get what your work is and the value of your work across, and speak strategically before you can actively engage people. Say, this is where we want to head as a leader. This is my vision. This is my goal. So communicating that kind of engaging conversation, like how do we work best with each other? What are the challenges with um, you know working as a team when you don't necessarily see eye to eye with people? How do you manage that? How do you work through it? Because in my mind, it's your innovation doesn't happen in an incremental, stepwise fashion. Innovation happens after conflict is managed, and at the end result is really the magic, right? So I think it's skills that we have to build to understand, how do we talk to each other to say, yeah, we're in conflict, but we're going to figure this out, get through it, and because at the end of it is going to be special, right? So that's the type of thing that I like to work on. When people come to me, they say, how can you help us? How can you look at the bigger picture and say, what are our needs? Do we need coaching? Do we need training? Um, you know, all sorts of perspectives of what are the challenges that we are seeing in our organization, particularly because we're technical experts and seen as technical experts. What can we do to elevate and understand what the value we have and what we bring to the organization, and drive business in that regard? So trying to put all those pieces together for people and their groups is what I like to do.
When it comes to the work that you do with Hart and Chin, is it typically people who lead departments that come to you for assistance? Is it HR or talent development that comes to you? How does that work?
It's the easiest for situation is when you get a senior executive who comes from the STEM world who understands and recognizes the need for this type of work. They say, in all honesty, I think we can do a better job in working with each other. What can we smooth out and be more effective as a team? And then how do I help my leaders to be more effective as well, right? And so, helping them take a look at the broader organization, asking them, inquiring like, what are the challenges that you see and where do you want to head in that aspect of it? And then, trying to draw a strategic plan as to how are we going to get from point A to point B. So that's the best case scenario because sometimes, and I don't know if you face this all the time, that when it comes from HR, it's not as strongly received. Not all the time. Like, but say, for instance, if you have a team that's not very aware, self-aware of itself and its needs to improve their interactions with each other, having HR come in and say, "Hey, you need this training," doesn't is a good thing, but it doesn't necessarily come across well every time, let's just say. But it's not to say that a lot of HR partners are amazing with saying, hey, we've identified a need in the organization, had this conversation with our executives and said, hey, consider it, give it a shot, give it a try. And when that window of willingness exists, that's where we have to, take the jump in and say, let's see what happens. And if it resonates, let's go for it, right? So that is the larger organization. But then I also work with people one-on-one with coaching. That's kind of a thing that I enjoy quite a bit is to, really work with an individual and say, from their perspective, where do they want to head? What's their goal? And work with them strategically to say, what are the particular challenges or barriers that you feel you're facing? Maybe edge yourself into a little bit of the uncomfortable zone, and then see you grow from there, right? Because a lot of the times we're sitting at our work and we're head down, and it's hard to you always having to fight fires or you're just figuring out the next process or something along those lines, but you're not focused on yourself. So I love to have those conversations one-on-one and say, hey, have you thought of, or, ask them the right questions to have them ponder what options, what opportunities or options else they have.
Juliet, when I first started this podcast and YouTube channel, and it's still the case today, it was based on my own struggles giving presentations in front of others, working as an engineer. And I noticed a lot of the other engineers weren't all that much better at it than I was. But I certainly saw the benefit of getting better at it, and I did do so over time. When it comes to you and public speaking, is that something you've always been good at? And if not, what did you do to get better at it?
Oh no, I was um absolutely anxious, full of anxiety, public speaking. Even at meetings, it was truly anxiety inducing for me to just speak up, share what I was doing, and so on and so forth. And I think maybe I always relate it maybe a little bit of a cultural space where I've grown up thinking that I'm not supposed to take up space, if that makes any sense. I'm not supposed to be the loudest voice. I'm not supposed to be the one that sticks up and does any kind of big motions or rocks the boat in some regard. And so for me to even feel comfortable to say something or to interject in any way took considerable effort for me. Um, but over time, I mean, it was started to be limitations where my boss would force me to stand up in front of the room while I'm talking at a basic meeting when no one else had to stand up in the front of the room. And other examples. And especially when it came to that 1,000 person presentation, I literally felt like I was gonna die at some point. And of course I didn't, and that's logically it didn't, but it was truly anxiety driving. But again, I had that inkling of, if I want to grow, I'm going to do it. And reality was that I was questioning myself of whether I could give this talk or not, and wondered if someone else might take the opportunity away from me who was more senior, or that I had known other speakers who had just given away their opportunity because they didn't feel like they could speak. And so for me to just be up there, whether I did a good job or not, meant a lot to me. And it kind of pushed me over the edge to say, what else can I do? But yeah, to your point, the anxiety, the fear and was very real. And I think over time now, for me, because leadership is so important to me, that I paired the speaking with becoming, I call it a servant leader, that I feel like I have something to say, and I say it to the benefit of others. And that helps me in saying, I'm not taking this space just for myself, but I'm taking this space to help others also be better, do better, show their value as well.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely can relate. Not necessarily be in front of 1,000 people, but certainly being in front of, well, when I had to give presentations, I had to give it in front of senior management. We're talking CEO, CTO, CMO, C fill in the blank O, all them C's. Just
Yeah.
sitting in a conference room listening to me and other engineers give project status updates on the projects we were working on. These were 10-minute presentations at most, and they were not very good. They weren't good at all. I would get up there and I'd read slides and not look at anybody and hope I can get out of there as quickly as possible. But I never got out of there as quickly as possible. I got a lot of questions afterwards I thought I'd answered during the presentation, but obviously I didn't, because now I'm getting these questions. And if I was sweating before the presentation, now I'm really sweating during it and after it during the Q&A. And I did this for quite some time, and before I figured out, this whole presenting in front of people thing, maybe this is something I need to get better at. When it comes to the presentations that you do you have a process for putting them together? And if so, what is it?
Presentations, it depends on the level of who you're talking to, especially in a technical presentation, right? Sometimes it actually seems a little bit, maybe not easier, but more generic. Not generic. I don't know how to put it. When you're looking at it from a very high level perspective, you needed to make it very accessible to a general audience, right? But if you're looking at it from a very deep technical level, you want to think about specifically who is your audience and that will understand the content that you're going to deliver to them, and why do they want to understand that content, right? And you know this best with, who is your audience, because if you don't target your audience, like you said, you'll get a bunch of questions because you didn't answer anything that they needed to answer, right? So from a technical perspective, I find, and you probably find this too, is that you sit with the person to dig in deep, like go through all the weeds and figure out what is it they really want to say, and then, bring that conclusion to the front, to the top. I think when you get to a more senior level, that the similar things happen, but you don't usually get so far in technical weeds, but you do need to drive decisions. So how does your presentation help answer this question that the business has to make a decision as ASAP, which time and effort is money, right? So that's depending on the level that you're presenting at, and obviously the audience that you're presenting to. It's the templates, quote unquote, or the process is different.
Do you ever get nervous before giving a presentation? And if so, how do you deal with your nerves?
Oh, every time. I don't know if anytime I haven't been nervous in giving a presentation. Um, but I think, one practice, doing the same talk, it helps over and over. And then recognizing that you are the expert of what you're saying, and preparing for what is it that others want from you, want to understand. That helps me to connect the dots and saying, well, I'm here because of my audience. They have a need from me, and I'm going to deliver to them. It's not about, you know, what who I am in all that regard. It's I'm here to offer something up. And if I focus on that, that's a lot easier for me to not feel as anxious. But to say that I still feel anxious every time.
Yeah, I think it's a sign, being anxious or being nervous, anxious, whatever you want to call it. It's a sign that you actually care about the outcome.
I
Whenever I,
agree.
whenever I actually had a guest once that said that she never got nervous before giving a presentation, and I just kept thinking the entire time she was talking, "You're full of it. I don't believe you."
Well, I mean, I can certainly believe that some people don't get anxious after maybe like 100th time, but to your point, I want to make sure that I still am involved and I still care and I still want to deliver what my audience wants, and that matters to me. So yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. For the people who are watching or listening to this conversation, Juliet, and if you were to offer them one reason to get better at public speaking, what would it be?
For me, what I do a lot of is to really highlight the value of who you are, what you do. And I think it's kind of a space that we, sadly don't take advantage of as much as we can, is to say, like, I just want to tell people what I do and why it's important to me and maybe to you. And if you connect those dots to say, I really love the work that I do, and this is why. Um, that's the part that makes me really happy. Not that everyone worries about me, but I think that's what connects the dots in terms of why is that next person special? What do they have to offer, and why do I want to listen to them? So try to do that. I say, just tell people, why do you love to do the things you do, and why might it be important for someone else?
Excellent. Well, this has been a great conversation, Juliet. Thank you so much for being
Yeah.
a guest. How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. That's easy to just connect with me. Hartandchin.com. That's my website. And feel free to ping me anytime. So,
Excellent. Excellent. Well, everyone, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Juliet.
thanks.